He thought he was untouchable. Felicity walked into the most important business dinner of his life with his mistress on his arm, wearing his wife's diamonds, convinced his boring housewife was at home knitting. He was there to close a $100 million deal with a mysterious new investor known only as the Shadow. But when the investor finally spun their chair around at the head of the table, Felicity didn't see a stranger. He saw the woman he'd been lying to for 10 years, and she wasn't there to sign a check. She was there to sign his death warrant. Felicity adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Brioni suit, catching his reflection in the tinted windows of the waiting Bentley Continental GT. He looked every inch the master of the universe he believed himself to be. At 42, he was the CEO of Apex Dynamics, a real estate development firm on the verge of reshaping the Manhattan skyline. But to get to the next level, to truly join the billionaires' club, he needed capital. Massive capital. "Stop fidgeting, Dom. You look like $1 million," a voice cooed from the back seat. Delwyn leaned forward, her fingers trailing along his shoulder. She was 23, a former runway model for Gucci, who had decided that being the arm candy of a married CEO was a more lucrative career path. She was wearing a stunning, backless emerald gown that clung to her like a second skin. Around her neck sat a diamond choker that had cost Felicity $50,000, money he had quietly siphoned from a joint account he shared with his wife, Victoria. "It's not just $1 million, Tiff," Felicity snapped, though he softened his tone when he looked at her. "Tonight is a $200 million night. If I land this deal with Amanda Capital, I'm done with the small leagues. I'll own this city." "And what about her?" Delwyn asked, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Does the dowdy Duchess know where you are?" Felicity laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "Victoria? Please. She thinks I'm at a retreat in the Hamptons for stress management. She's probably sitting on the couch in her sweatpants, watching reruns of The Crown and eating yogurt. She hasn't had a clue about my business, or us, for 3 years." Victoria, his wife of 15 years. In Felicity's mind, she was a relic of his past. She had supported him when he was a nobody, working double shifts as a paralegal while he finished his MBA at Wharton, but he had conveniently forgotten that part of their history. Now he saw her only as an anchor dragging him down, too plain, too quiet, too uninterested in the glamorous life he felt he deserved. "I still don't get why I had to come," Delwyn pouted, checking her makeup in her compact mirror. "Business dinners are boring." "Because, babe," Felicity said, checking his Rolex Submariner, "this investor, V. Amanda, is rumored to be a European playboy. They say he likes the high life. Walking in with the most beautiful woman in New York on my arm shows power. It shows I take what I want. Men like Amanda respect that." He didn't mention the real reason. He was addicted to the thrill. Parading his mistress around in public, right under the nose of his social circle, gave him a rush of adrenaline. It was the ultimate power trip. "Driver," Felicity commanded, "take us to Le Bernardin." As the car pulled away from their Upper East Side penthouse, Felicity's phone buzzed. It was a text from Victoria. "Good luck with the retreat, honey. Don't work too hard. I'm handling some house maintenance tonight. Love you." He smirked and tossed the phone onto the leather seat. "House maintenance," he muttered. Pathetic. Little did he know, the maintenance she was planning involved taking out the trash. And he was the garbage. Le Bernardin was the kind of restaurant where the air itself smelled expensive. The lighting was dim, the clientele hushed, and the service invisible until you needed something. It was the preferred hunting ground for New York's elite. Felicity strode in with Delwyn on his arm, enjoying the heads that turned. He spotted the table immediately. It was the prime spot, private but visible, reserved for V. Amanda. Sitting at the table already was Mr. Henderson, the intermediary from Goldman Sachs who had arranged the meeting. Henderson was a grey-haired, stoic man who had seen everything on Wall Street, yet even he raised an eyebrow as Felicity approached with Delwyn. "Mr. Felicity," Henderson said, standing up but not offering a hand. He looked at Delwyn. "And I assume this is a frantic assistant?" Delwyn bristled. "I'm his partner, in life." Felicity patted her hand, guiding her to a chair. "Relax, Henderson. Delwyn is with me. She has a good head for aesthetics. I figured Mr. Amanda would appreciate the company." Henderson sat back down, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Amanda is a very private individual, Felicity. He values discretion above all else. I'm not sure bringing a guest was wise." "I take risks," Felicity said, pouring himself a glass of water from the crystal pitcher. "That's why I'm the best developer in the city. Amanda wants a shark, not a sheep. So, when does the man arrive?" "The investor is running 5 minutes late," Henderson said, checking his pocket watch. "But be warned, Amanda Capital has done a forensic audit of your company, Apex Dynamics. They know your books better than you do." Felicity waved a hand dismissively. "My books are spotless. Creative maybe, but spotless. I built that company from the ground up." "Did you?" Henderson asked quietly. "I was under the impression your initial seed money 15 years ago came from a family inheritance." Felicity stiffened. "A small loan from my wife's late father. I paid it back 10 times over. Victoria's family money is long gone. I'm the breadwinner now." Delwyn giggled, sipping the vintage Pinot Noir the waiter had just poured. "Dom takes care of everything. Victoria doesn't even know the password to the bank accounts. It's actually kind of sad. She's like a child." Henderson stared at Delwyn for a long moment, a strange glint in his eye. "Is that so? You believe Mrs. Victoria is incapable?" "She's a housewife," Felicity interrupted, annoyed that the conversation had turned to his wife. "She bakes cookies and volunteers at the library. Let's stop talking about domestic matters. I'm here to talk about the Skyline project." "Of course," Henderson said. "But you should know, the investor insisted on a specific condition for this meeting." "Which is?" "Total transparency," Henderson said. "Amanda Capital does not tolerate lies, professional or personal." Felicity laughed again, louder this time. "I have nothing to hide." Suddenly the restaurant went quiet. It wasn't a gradual silence, it was an immediate hush, the kind that happens when a predator enters a room. The heavy oak doors at the front of the private dining room swung open. The maitre d' bowed lower than Felicity had ever seen him bow before. "He's here," Felicity whispered, straightening his tie. He nudged Delwyn. "Sit up straight. Look expensive." A figure walked through the door, but it wasn't a man in a suit. It was a woman. She was wearing a sharp, white Alexander McQueen power suit that glowed in the dim light. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. She wore oversized dark sunglasses, and her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, was cascading down her shoulders in perfect glossy waves. Felicity squinted. The walk was familiar. The height was familiar. But the aura, the terrifying, cold confidence radiating off her, was completely alien. The woman reached the table. Felicity stood up, confused. "Excuse me, miss. We're waiting for Mr. Amanda." The woman reached up and slowly removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were cold, hard steel. "Sit down, Felicity," Victoria said. The silence at the table was so heavy, it felt like it could crush Felicity's lungs. He blinked, once, twice, sure that he was hallucinating. "Victoria," he choked out, His voice cracked, stripping away the CEO bravado in an instant. Delwyn dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the fine china. "Wait, this is the wife? The librarian?" Victoria didn't even look at Delwyn. She didn't scream. She didn't throw a drink. She simply pulled out the chair at the head of the table, the seat reserved for the investor, and sat down with the grace of a queen taking her throne. "Mr. Henderson," Victoria said, her voice smooth and professional. "Thank you for setting this up. The wine selection is excellent." "A pleasure as always, Miss Amanda," Henderson replied, bowing his head respectfully. "Amanda?" Felicity looked between Henderson and his wife, his brain misfiring. "What is going on? Victoria, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at home. And why is he calling you Amanda?" Victoria picked up the menu, scanning it casually. "I used my maiden name for the firm, Felicity. You remember my maiden name, don't you? Or have you forgotten that too, along with your wedding vows?" You are Amanda Capital," Felicity whispered, the color draining from his face. "That's impossible. You don't work. You don't have money like this. Amanda Capital is worth billions." Victoria finally looked at him. The look was devoid of love, devoid of anger. It was purely business. "My grandfather didn't just leave me a small loan, Felicity. He left me an empire. But I knew you. I knew your ego couldn't handle a wife who was richer and smarter than you. So I let you play the big man. I funneled my investments through shell companies. I built Amanda Capital quietly, in the shadows, while you were busy buying leased cars and—" She glanced briefly at Delwyn. "Renting cheap company." "Cheap?" Delwyn screeched, standing up. "My outfit cost more than your car." "Sit down, child," Victoria said. She didn't raise her voice, but the command was absolute. "Or I will have security remove you. This is a business meeting, and currently I am the one holding the checkbook." Delwyn looked at Felicity, expecting him to defend her. But Felicity was paralyzed. He was running the numbers in his head, the forensic audit Henderson had mentioned. If Victoria was Amanda Capital, that meant she had seen everything. The embezzlement, the gifts to Delwyn, the hidden offshore accounts. "Victoria, honey," Felicity started, putting on his best salesman smile, though his lip quivered. "Okay, you got me. Great prank, amazing. You're the investor. That's incredible. Think of what we can do together. With your capital and my vision, we can—" "Your vision," Victoria interrupted. She snapped her fingers, and Henderson pulled a thick file from his briefcase, sliding it across the table. "Part of the due diligence process," Victoria said, "was analyzing your vision. It seems your vision involves funneling $3 million of company funds into an account listed under consulting fees for a Ms. Delwyn Miller." She looked at Delwyn. "I assume that's you? You're a very expensive consultant. I hope you're good at math, because the IRS is going to be very interested in your unreported income." Delwyn went pale. "Felicity told me it was a gift. He said it was tax-free." "He lied," Victoria said simply. "He does that." Felicity slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. Okay, so you know. Fine. We're having problems. We can talk about the marriage later. But right now, this is business. Apex Dynamics is a solid investment. If you let your emotions get in the way of a 20% ROI, you're a bad businesswoman." Victoria smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Oh, I'm an excellent businesswoman, Felicity. That's why I'm not investing in Apex Dynamics." "Then why are we here?" Felicity demanded. "We're here," Victoria said, signaling the waiter to pour the wine, "because I'm not just the investor. I'm the majority shareholder of the bank that holds your current loans, and as of this morning, I've called them in." Felicity felt the air leave the room. The ambient noise of Le Bernardin, the clinking of silver against porcelain, the soft hum of conversation, seemed to fade into a dull roar in his ears. "You called the loans in?" Felicity repeated, his voice sounding hollow. "You can't do that. The maturity date is in 2028. Victoria took a slow sip of her wine, savouring the bouquet. "Read the fine print, Felicity. Clause 14, Section B. The lender reserves the right to accelerate debt repayment in the event of gross mismanagement or reputational risk to the borrower." She set the glass down with a precise clink. Embezzling $3 million to fund a mistress is the definition of gross mismanagement. And as for reputational risk, well, having the CEO indicted for tax fraud tends to make investors nervous. "Tax fraud?" Delwyn squeaked, her hands trembling as she clutched her designer purse. "Felicity, you said the accountant handled everything. You said I was an employee." "Shut up, Delwyn!" Felicity roared, causing heads at nearby tables to turn. He lowered his voice, leaning over the table, his face turning a blotchy shade of red. "Victoria, listen to me. If you sink Apex Dynamics, you sink us. That company is our future. It's my legacy. If I go down, half your assets go down with me. We are married, remember. Community property." Victoria laughed softly. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was the laugh of someone watching a child try to perform a magic trick they had figured out years ago. "Oh, Felicity, you really don't remember, do you?" She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. 5 years ago, you were paranoid that my little library hobbies and charity debts would impact your rising star. You made us sign a post-nuptial agreement. You insisted on completely separate finances. You wanted to protect your millions from my mediocrity. Felicity's jaw dropped. The memory hit him like a physical blow. He had done that. He had been so arrogant, so sure that he would be the billionaire and she would be the dead weight, that he had legally severed their financial ties to protect himself. "That document," Victoria continued, "works both ways. My assets, Amanda Capital, the bank, the real estate portfolio, are untouchable. Your debts, however, are entirely your own." Henderson cleared his throat. "Mr. Felicity, as of 5 or so p.m. today, the bank has frozen all corporate accounts associated with Apex Dynamics pending an investigation. Furthermore, since your personal assets were used as collateral for the secondary expansion loans, those have been frozen as well." Felicity scrambled for his phone, his fingers fumbling as he opened his banking app. He tapped the screen frantically. Access denied. Contact your financial institution. He tried his credit card app. Suspended. "This isn't happening," Felicity muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. "This is a nightmare." "No, Felicity," Victoria said, cutting into her sea bass. "The nightmare was the last 10 years of me waiting for you to come home, smelling like her perfume, while I managed your mother's hospice care alone. The nightmare was you missing our anniversary to take her to Cabo. This is just waking up." Delwyn stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm leaving. I didn't sign up for this. I date rich men, Felicity, not broke fraud cases." "Delwyn, wait!" Felicity reached for her arm, but she recoiled. "Don't touch me, and don't think I'm going down for your tax mess," she hissed. She looked at Victoria. I didn't know he was stealing the money. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything if you keep my name out of the papers." Felicity looked at Delwyn with betrayal written all over his face. "After everything I bought you? The apartment. The car." "The car is leased in the company name," Victoria corrected helpfully. and I've already sent a tow truck to pick it up from Ms. Miller's residence. As for the apartment, the rent hasn't been paid in 2 months. Felicity seems to be having cash flow issues." Delwyn let out a horrified gasp, spun on her heel, and stormed out of the restaurant, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and shattered dignity in her wake. Felicity slumped in his chair. He was alone now. Just him, the wife he had underestimated, and the lawyer who had executed his execution. "What do you want, Victoria?" Felicity whispered, defeated. "You want me to beg? Is that it? Fine, I'm begging. Don't destroy the company. It employs 300 people. "I'm not destroying the company," Victoria said calmly. "I'm saving it. Apex Dynamics has good bones. It just has a rotten head." She signaled for the check. When the waiter arrived with the leather folder, he instinctively placed it in front of Felicity. Felicity stared at the bill. $200. He didn't have a working card. He didn't have cash. Victoria watched him for a long, agonizing minute. The humiliation in his eyes was palpable. He was a king who had just realized he was naked. Finally, Victoria reached over, took the folder, and placed a sleek, black titanium card inside. "I'll get this," she said to the waiter. She looked back at Felicity. "Consider it a severance package. You're fired." The next morning, the sun rose over Manhattan with a cruel brightness. Felicity had spent the night in a cheap motel in Queens, the only place he could afford with the $80 of emergency cash he had found in his glove compartment. He hadn't slept. He had spent the entire night pacing, calling every board member, every ally, every friend he thought he had. No one answered. At 8 a.m. sharp, he stood in front of the Apex Dynamics tower. It was a gleaming structure of glass and steel that he had commissioned. His name wasn't on the building, but his ego was embedded in every girder. He straightened his wrinkled tuxedo jacket. He hadn't been able to go home to change because his key fob to the penthouse had been deactivated, and marched toward the revolving doors. "Mr. Felicity, sir." The security guard, a man Felicity had walked past for 5 years without ever learning his name, stepped in front of him. "I can't let you in." "Get out of my way, Johnson," Felicity snapped. He guessed the name. It was wrong. "I'm the CEO of this company." "Not anymore, sir," the guard said, looking uncomfortable but firm. "I have strict orders from the new acting chairperson. Your security clearance has been revoked." "Revoked? By who? My wife?" Felicity laughed hysterically. "She can't just take over. There's a board of directors." "The board met at 6 a.m., Felicity." The voice came from the lobby. Felicity looked through the glass to see Peter, his CFO and best friend from college, walking toward him. Peter looked tired, but he was dressed impeccably. "Peter!" Felicity shouted, pressing his hands against the glass. "Tell this rent-a-cop to let me in. Tell them what Victoria is doing." Peter signaled the guard to open the door, but he didn't step aside to let Felicity pass. He stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance. "The board voted unanimously, Dom," Peter said quietly. "We removed you as CEO effective immediately. Cause for termination: embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, and gross misconduct." "Unanimously?" Felicity felt the ground sway. "But you? We played golf on Sunday. You're the godfather of my non-existent children. You sided with her." "She brought receipts, Dom," Peter said, his voice hardening. "She showed us the transfers to Delwyn Miller. She showed us the shell companies you were using to hide losses. And then she showed us the check from Amanda Capital. She's injecting $50 million to stabilize the company and save everyone's jobs. The only condition was your removal." Peter looked at his old friend with pity. It was a simple choice: save the company or save the guy who was robbing it. "I chose the company." "I built you," Felicity spat. "I made you rich." "And you almost sent me to prison," Peter retorted. "The SEC is already in the building, Dom. They're seizing your hard drives. If I were you, I wouldn't be trying to get in. I'd be trying to find a lawyer, a cheap one." Felicity stumbled back onto the sidewalk. People were staring. Employees arriving for work were whispering, pointing at the disheveled man in the tuxedo standing on the street corner at 8:30 in the morning. A black town car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. It was Victoria. She looked fresh, rested, and terrifyingly beautiful in a navy business suit. "Get in, Felicity," she said. "Go to hell," he muttered, though he lacked the energy to make it sound convincing. "I'm going to the penthouse to oversee the packing of your belongings," she said. "I thought you might want to retrieve your watch collection before it's auctioned off to pay your legal fees." Felicity opened the door and collapsed into the seat next to her. The car smelled of leather and lavender. The scent she always wore, the scent he used to say gave him a headache. "Why?" he asked, staring at his hands. "Why wait 10 years? Why let me build all this just to tear it down?" "I didn't wait 10 years to tear you down," Victoria said softly, signaling the driver to move. "I waited 10 years hoping you would grow up. I waited for you to stop needing the validation of strangers and plastic women. I waited for the man I married, the one who wanted to build homes for families, not monuments to himself, to come back." She turned to look at him, her expression sad. "But he never came back. You just got hungrier. And when you started stealing, when you started risking the livelihoods of the people who worked for you just to buy Delwyn a necklace, I knew I had to stop you." "I can fix it," Felicity said, a desperate plan forming in his mind. "I can pay it back. I have friends. I have connections." "You have nothing, Felicity," Victoria said. "I spoke to your friends this morning. The country club membership? Revoked. The yacht club? Revoked. Even your tailor called to cancel your fittings. You see, these people didn't like you, Felicity. They liked your proximity to power, and you are now powerless." The car pulled up to their building, the Trump International Hotel and Tower, but there were news vans outside, cameras, reporters. "What is this?" Felicity asked, panicked. "I told you," Victoria said, putting on her sunglasses. "Hard karma. The press caught wind of the SEC raid. They know about the embezzlement, and they know about the Mistress." She turned to him one last time. "I'm going in through the private garage. You, however, are getting out here." "Here? In front of the cameras?" "You loved the spotlight, Felicity," Victoria said, reaching across him and opening his door. "Now you have it." She pushed him. Felicity stumbled out of the car, right into a wall of flashing lights and shouting reporters. "Mr. Felicity, is it true you stole $3 million? Mr. Felicity, did you use company funds for your mistress? Mr. Felicity, do you have a comment on your wife taking over the company?" As the cameras flashed, blinding him, Felicity looked back at the town car. He saw Victoria's silhouette through the tinted window. She didn't look back. The car sped away, disappearing into the dark garage, leaving him to be eaten alive by the wolves he had once tried to lead. The weeks following the implosion at Le Bernardin were not a slide. They were a free fall. Felicity didn't just lose his job, he was systematically erased from the world he had helped build. It began with the freezing of the assets. It wasn't just the bank accounts, it was everything. When Felicity tried to enter his gym, an exclusive club that cost $25,000 a year, his fob triggered a silent alarm. When he tried to pick up his dry cleaning, he was told his account had been suspended for non-payment. The invisible infrastructure of his privileged life, which he had always taken for granted, simply evaporated. But the divorce was the first true blow of the axe. Felicity sat in a sterile conference room in Midtown, across from Victoria, and a phalanx of lawyers from Cravath, Swain and Moore. He had no high-powered counsel. He had a weary general practitioner named Saul, whom he had found in the Yellow Pages and paid with the last of his cash. "The terms are clear, Felicity," Victoria said. She wasn't looking at him. She was signing documents with a steady, rhythmic scratch of her fountain pen. "You insisted on the ironclad asset separation clause 5 years ago. You said, and I quote, 'I don't want my hard work subsidizing your hobbies.'" She slid a document across the mahogany table. "I'm honoring your request," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Amanda Capital is mine. The apartment is mine. The house in the Hamptons is mine. The art collection is mine. You leave with your personal effects, your wardrobe, and your debts." "My debts?" Felicity choked out. "The IRS lien, the credit card bills. Victoria, that's over $4 million. If you don't help me, I'm destitute." Victoria finally looked up. Her eyes were dry. "You spent that money on Delwyn, Felicity. You bought the diamonds. You chartered the yachts. Why should I pay for the woman who wrecked my home? That debt is your souvenir." She capped her pen. "Sign the papers, Felicity, or I hand over the unredacted travel logs to the district attorney, the ones that show you took a company jet to St. Bart's for a site inspection that was actually a week-long party." Felicity signed. His hand shook so badly, the signature looked like a seismograph of an earthquake. But the civil humiliation was nothing compared to the criminal trial. The district attorney, sensing a career-making headline, didn't hold back. They charged Felicity with grand larceny, securities fraud, and falsifying business records. The trial was a media circus. Every day, Felicity had to walk the gauntlet of photographers on the courthouse steps. "The Wolf of Wall Street meets the Rat of Queens," one tabloid headline read. The prosecution's star witness was the final nail in his coffin, Delwyn Miller. When she walked into the courtroom, Felicity almost didn't recognize her. Gone were the backless dresses and the diamonds he had stolen to buy her. She wore a modest, high-necked grey sweater, glasses, and little makeup. She looked like a librarian. She looked innocent. "Ms. Miller," the prosecutor asked gently, "did you know that the money Mr. Felicity was spending on you was stolen from Apex Dynamics?" Delwyn sniffled, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "No," she whispered into the microphone. "He told me he was a billionaire. He told me he owned the city. When I asked about the strange transfers, he got angry. He told me not to worry my pretty little head about finance. I was scared of him. He was so powerful. I just did what he told me." Felicity jumped to his feet, knocking his chair over. "That's a lie! You asked for the Cartier bracelet. You picked out the penthouse. Order!" The judge banged his gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Felicity, or I will have you bound and gagged." Felicity slumped back, watching in horror as Delwyn buried him. She had turned state's evidence to save her own skin, painting herself as a naive victim of a manipulative tycoon. The jury ate it up. They looked at Felicity, sweating, angry, arrogant, and they saw a villain straight out of central casting. The verdict took less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was where reality truly set in. Felicity stood before the judge, expecting a prison sentence. He had heard the rumors. 5 to 10 years in federal prison. "Mr. Felicity," the judge said, peering over his spectacles, "your actions were reprehensible. You betrayed your shareholders, your employees, and your family." The judge paused. "However, the victim, Apex Dynamics, now under the leadership of Ms. Victoria Amanda, has requested leniency regarding incarceration. She argues that you cannot pay restitution if you are sitting in a cell." Felicity felt a flicker of hope. Victoria was saving him. Therefore, the judge continued, I am sentencing you to 5 years of strict probation. You will perform 2,000 hours of community service, and you are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $3.2 million. Your wages will be garnished at a rate of 60% until the debt is paid in full. You are also barred from holding any officer position in a publicly traded company for life. It wasn't mercy. It was slavery. Victoria hadn't saved him from prison. She had sentenced him to a lifetime of poverty. She wanted him out in the world, working, struggling, and remembering what he had done every time he looked at his paycheck. The fall from the penthouse was literal. Evicted from his temporary hotel, Felicity moved into a basement studio apartment in Astoria, Queens. It was a concrete box with one small window at street level, offering a view of passing ankles and piles of trash. The radiator clanked all night like a dying engine. The shower had 2 temperatures, freezing and scalding. To pay off the first installment of his restitution, the court ordered a liquidation auction of his personal property. Felicity stood at the back of the auction house, wearing a baseball cap, watching his life being sold off piece by piece. Lot 45, the auctioneer boomed. A Patek Philippe Nautilus, rose gold. Do I hear 50,000? That watch had been a gift to himself for his 40th birthday. He watched a chubby teenager in a hoodie buy it for a fraction of its value. Lot 52, a custom set of Brioni suits, his armor, sold to a vintage clothing reseller. Lot 60, a collection of vintage wines, retrieved from the defendant's private cellar. Felicity felt tears prick his eyes. He had collected those bottles for decades, saving them for special occasions. Now, strangers would drink them, laughing about how they got them cheap from that criminal CEO. When he walked out of the auction house, his pockets were empty. He had $400 to his name and a debt that would take 3 lifetimes to pay off. Finding a job was the next circle of hell. Felicity had an MBA from Wharton. He had run a $100 million company, but his resume was now a radioactive warning sign. He applied for management jobs. Rejected. He applied for consulting gigs. Ignored. He applied to be a shift manager at a hardware store. Overqualified, the manager told him, eyeing him suspiciously. And honestly, buddy, I Googled you. I can't have a guy who stole $3 million running my cash register. Desperation set in. The rent was due. He was eating instant noodles and skipping meals. The hunger was a constant, gnawing reminder of the steak dinners he used to leave half-eaten. Finally, a break. A small livery cab company in Long Island City was hiring drivers. They didn't care about his MBA or his scandals. They cared that he had a clean driving record and a pulse. You drive the night shift, the dispatcher, a gruff man named Sal, told him. 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. You pay for your own gas. You keep the tips. You crash the car. You buy the car. Capiche? Understood, Felicity said, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor. And hey, Sal added, pointing a greasy finger at him. I know who you are. I saw the news. You try any funny math with the meter, and I'll break your legs myself. We don't do white-collar crime here. We do street justice. I just want to work, Felicity whispered. 6 months after the dinner at Le Bernardin, on a grey, drizzling Tuesday, Felicity found an old box in his closet. Inside was his company laptop and an encrypted hard drive belonging to Apex Dynamics. He hadn't realized he still had them. He knew he had to return them. If he didn't, it could be a violation of his probation. He took the subway into Manhattan. He couldn't afford a cab, even though he drove one. He emerged from the station and walked toward the tower he used to rule. The building looked different. The landscaping was lush. The energy was vibrant. People were bustling in and out, smiling. It didn't look like a crime scene anymore. He approached the reception desk. The young woman there didn't recognize him. I have a delivery for the CEO, Felicity stammered, clutching the plastic bag containing the electronics. It's property of the company. I can take it, the receptionist said brightly. No, a voice came from the elevators. Let him through. Felicity froze. Peter was standing there. He looked tired but sharp, holding a tablet. Hello, Felicity, Peter said. Peter. Felicity nodded, feeling the shame burn his cheeks. I found these. Didn't want any trouble. Come up, Peter said. Just for a minute. Felicity followed him into the elevator, the private executive elevator he had installed. The ride up was silent, the numbers ticking up like a countdown. When the doors opened on the top floor, Felicity gasped. The office had been gutted, the dark wood paneling, the heavy leather furniture, the masculine aesthetic Felicity had loved. It was all gone. The space was open, airy, filled with light and glass. It looked modern. It looked transparent. Victoria was standing by the window, looking out at the skyline. She turned when they entered. Here, Felicity said, placing the laptop on a glass table. That's everything. I promise. Victoria looked at the bag, then at him. She took in his frayed collar, his scuffed shoes, the dark circles under his eyes. Thank you, she said. I see you changed the office, Felicity said, trying to fill the silence. We changed the culture, Victoria corrected. We opened the books. We gave the employees profit sharing. It turns out people work harder when they aren't afraid of their boss. She walked over to a model on a pedestal. It was a 3D rendering of the new Skyline project. We finished the Skyline project, Felicity, she said softly, but we renamed it. It's the Phoenix Tower now. Fitting, Felicity muttered. You rose from the ashes. We all did, Victoria said. She looked him dead in the eye. Except you. You're still holding on to the match. What do you want me to say, Victoria? Felicity snapped, a flash of his old temper surfacing. That I'm sorry? I've said it. That I'm suffering. Look at me. I drive a town car for $12 an hour. I live in a basement. You won. Is it enough? Victoria didn't flinch. I didn't want to win, Felicity. I wanted a husband. I wanted a partner. But you made me choose between being your victim or being your judge. I chose judge. She signaled to Peter. Goodbye, Felicity, she said, turning back to the window. I won't keep you. I'm sure you have a shift to get to. Felicity stood there for a moment, looking at her back. He wanted to scream. He wanted to beg. But he knew it was useless. The woman who had knitted on the couch while he cheated was gone. In her place was a titan he had created through his own neglect. He turned and walked out, the elevator doors closing on his former life with a final, heavy thud. 5 years later, the alarm clock on the floor buzzed with a violent plastic rattle at 4:30 a.m. Felicity groaned, rolling off the thin mattress that took up most of the floor space in his basement studio apartment in Astoria, Queens. The room smelled of damp concrete and instant coffee. He sat up, rubbing his face. His hands, once manicured and soft from days spent signing documents and holding crystal tumblers, were now rough. His knuckles were dry and cracked. At 47, Felicity looked 60. The stress of the bankruptcy, the shame of the trial, and the relentless grind of survival had carved deep canyons into his face. His hair, once a thick, gelled mane of confidence, was thinning rapidly and graying at the temples. He stood up and walked to the small stained mirror hanging over the sink. He adjusted his tie, a cheap polyester clip-on that came with his uniform. Showtime, he whispered to his reflection. But the voice lacked the old arrogance. It was just a habit now, a ghost of a ritual from a dead life. Felicity worked for Prestige Livery, a mid-tier car service that catered to corporate clients who couldn't quite afford a private driver but refused to take a yellow cab. It was a humiliating fall from grace, but it was the only job he could get. His name was still poison in the real estate world. When people Googled Felicity, the first result was still the mugshot from his booking, followed by articles titled "The $1 Million Mistress" and "How One Dinner Destroyed a CEO." He grabbed his keys and headed out into the biting November wind. His first few fares were standard: a hungover investment banker going to Wall Street, a nervous family heading to JFK. Felicity was a good driver because he knew how to be invisible. He kept the partition up, the radio low, and his mouth shut. He had learned that people in the back seat didn't see the driver as a person. They saw him as an extension of the steering wheel. At 6 p.m., the dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. "Car 402, we have a VIP pickup at the Phoenix Tower. Destination, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Gala. Client requests a specific route through the park." Felicity froze. His hands tightened on the leather steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The Phoenix Tower. It was the building he had started, the project he had embezzled millions to fund, the skyscraper that was supposed to be his legacy. He hadn't been near it in 5 years. "Car 402, do you copy?" "Copy," Felicity choked out. "En route." He couldn't refuse. He needed the money. Rent was due in 3 days, and he was short. Pulling up to the building was a physical assault on his senses. The tower was magnificent. It pierced the Manhattan twilight like a shard of blue crystal. The landscaping was lush, the branding sleek and modern. And right there, above the revolving doors in tasteful silver lettering, were the words, "Amanda Capital Plaza." Felicity pulled his black Lincoln Town car to the curb, joining a line of limousines. He pulled his cap low over his eyes, praying the doorman wouldn't recognize him. But he needn't have worried. The doorman was new. The old staff, the ones Felicity had screamed at for not opening doors fast enough, were long gone. The revolving doors spun, and a couple emerged. Felicity felt his breath hitch in his throat. It was as if time had warped, folding back on itself to mock him. It was Victoria. She was breathtaking. She wore a floor-length gown of midnight blue velvet that shimmered under the streetlights. Diamonds, real diamonds, bought with her own money, glittered at her throat. But it wasn't the jewelry that struck Felicity. It was her posture. She stood tall, radiant, laughing at something the man beside her had said. The man was Peter, Felicity's former CFO, his former best friend, the man who had swung the axe. Peter looked distinguished in a tuxedo, his hair silver and distinguished. He looked happy. Not the stressed, overworked cruncher of numbers Felicity remembered, but a man at peace. He held an umbrella over Victoria's head, shielding her from the light drizzle with a tenderness that made Felicity's stomach churn. The doorman tapped on Felicity's window. "Trunks popped?" Felicity nodded, popping the trunk lever. He watched in the rearview mirror as the doorman loaded a small, heavy-looking gift box. Then, the rear door opened. "Thank you, James," Victoria said to the doorman, her voice carrying that familiar, crisp authority. They slid into the back seat. The door slammed shut, sealing them in the quiet, leather-scented capsule. Felicity's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Don't look up," he told himself. "Just drive." "Good evening," Felicity said, his voice dropping an octave, rough and unrecognizable. "Metropolitan Museum." "Yes, please," Peter replied, "and take the scenic route through the park. We have a bit of time before the speeches start." Felicity pulled the car into traffic. He stared straight ahead, his eyes locked on the asphalt, but his ears were tuned to the conversation behind him. He was a spy in his own past life. "I can't believe the quarterly numbers," Peter said, the sound of champagne being poured echoing in the small space. "The Asia expansion is already profitable. You were right to pivot away from the luxury condos, Vic. The commercial spaces are a gold mine." "It was a gamble," Victoria admitted, her voice warm. "But clean business usually pays off in the long run. It's amazing how much money you save when you aren't paying off silent partners and hiding losses in shell companies." Felicity flinched. The words felt like a slap. "Speaking of which," Peter said, his tone shifting to something softer, more somber. "I saw him the other day." Felicity's eyes widened. He almost hit the brakes. "Who?" Victoria asked. "Felicity," Peter said. "I was in Queens looking at that warehouse property for the logistics center. I saw him walking out of a bodega. He looked rough, Victoria. He was wearing a cheap suit. He looked like he's aged 20 years. There was a silence in the car. The city lights blurred past the windows. "Did you talk to him?" Victoria asked. Her voice was devoid of malice, which somehow made it worse. It was just curious. "No," Peter sighed. "I didn't think he'd want to see me. And honestly, I didn't know what to say." "Sorry I fired you and married your wife," seemed a bit harsh. "You didn't marry his wife, Peter," Victoria corrected him gently. "You married the woman he never bothered to meet. Felicity was married to a mirror. He only ever saw himself." "Still," Peter said, "do you ever feel bad? We took everything, the company, the assets, the friends." Felicity held his breath, waiting for the answer. He wanted her to say yes. He wanted her to say she missed him, that she regretted the ruthlessness, that she still thought about him late at night. "I didn't take anything from him, Peter," Victoria said, her voice steady and final. "He lost it. He threw it away with both hands. I just caught it before it hit the ground. If I hadn't stepped in, he would be in federal prison right now, not walking around Queens. We gave him the greatest gift of all, freedom from his own lies." "I suppose," Peter murmured. "He never did understand the value of enough." "No," Victoria agreed. "He always wanted more. And now, I imagine he has very little. It's a tragic balance." Felicity felt a single hot tear slide down his cheek. He quickly wiped it away with his shoulder, terrified they would see his eyes in the rearview mirror. They weren't angry. They weren't vengeful. They pitied him. They discussed him, like a distant, unfortunate weather event that had passed through their lives and dissipated. He was a footnote in their success story. The car turned onto Fifth Avenue. The Metropolitan Museum loomed ahead, its grand steps bathed in floodlights, a red carpet cascading down to the sidewalk. "We're here," Felicity croaked. He pulled the car to a smooth stop right at the base of the carpet. The paparazzi were already there, cameras flashing. This was the part of the job Felicity hated the most. He had to get out. He had to open the door. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. Just do the job. Get the tip. Go home. Felicity opened his door and stepped out into the cool night air. He walked around the back of the car, keeping his head down, the bill of his cap shading his eyes. He reached for the handle of the rear door and pulled it open. Peter stepped out first, adjusting his cufflinks. He didn't look at the driver. He turned back to offer a hand to Victoria. Victoria emerged from the car with the grace of a queen. She took Peter's hand, stepping onto the pavement. Then she paused. She turned her head, looking at the driver. Felicity tried to look away, to stare at the ground, but it was too late. Their eyes locked. For a second, the noise of the city vanished. The flashing cameras, the shouting paparazzi, the honking taxis. It all went silent. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. A flicker of recognition passed through them. She took in the cheap suit, The worn shoes, the tired, lined face of the man she had once vowed to love forever. Felicity braced himself. He waited for the scorn. He waited for her to recoil in disgust or laugh in triumph. But she didn't. Her expression softened into a profound, crushing sadness. She looked at him not as an enemy, but as a stranger she once knew. She reached into her small clutch purse. "Thank you for the ride," she said softly. She pulled out a crisp $100 bill. She held it out to him. Felicity stared at the money. It was charity. It was pity. It was the ultimate defeat. If he took it, he was admitting that he was nothing more than hired help. If he refused it, he was just a fool with pride he couldn't afford. His hand trembled as he reached out and took the bill. "Thank you, Mum," he whispered. Victoria nodded, a small, sad smile touching her lips. "Take care of yourself, Felicity." She used his name. She knew. She turned back to Peter, slipping her arm through his. "Ready, darling?" "Ready," Peter said, smiling at her. He hadn't noticed the exchange. He hadn't recognized the driver. To him, Felicity was truly invisible. Felicity stood by the open door of the Lincoln, clutching the $100 as he watched his ex-wife and his best friend walk up the red carpet. The cameras flashed, capturing their victory, their happiness, their future. They reached the top of the stairs and disappeared inside the museum into a world of warmth, light, and power. Felicity was left standing on the cold concrete. "Move it, buddy! You're blocking the line!" a traffic cop shouted, banging his baton on the trunk of the Lincoln. Felicity flinched, snapping back to reality. "Yeah," Felicity muttered. "I'm moving." He got back into the driver's seat. It felt colder than before. He looked at the dashboard. The meter read $45.50. He had made a profit. He put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb, merging back into the endless river of traffic. He turned on the radio to drown out the silence. A jazz song was playing, something mournful and slow. He drove past the Phoenix Tower one last time. He didn't look up. He kept his eyes on the road, driving toward the Queensboro Bridge, back to the basement, back to the shadows, carrying the heavy weight of a $100 bill in his pocket, the price of a soul sold too cheap. And that is the story of how Felicity learned the hardest lesson of his life. Never mistake silence for weakness, and never bite the hand that feeds you, especially if that hand is wearing a wedding ring. He thought he was the king of the castle, but he was just a jester in a queen's court. What do you think? Did Victoria go too far by destroying his career, or did Felicity get exactly what he deserved? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have forgiven him, or would you have pressed the button to ruin him just like she did? If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have plenty more tales of revenge and redemption coming your way. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.